So hi everyone, welcome again to Doors Within Us podcast. Our premise is celebrating the builders of tomorrow, and this is our last episode for 2023. As you guys know, our mission on this podcast is to share unconventional stories of diverse change makers, doers, founders, and investors that are building and supporting businesses in underserved markets, but also markets in the US, of course. But the ultimate vision is to create both local and global impact. Today, we have a special guest, last but not the least of 2023. And from the story you're gonna hear that we're gonna talk about, just her life story as well as building an amazing company, it will just be quite an experience. So we have with us Emily Levy. She is the co-founder, president, and also the chief brand officer of Mighty Well. So Emily, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to Doors Within Us podcast.
Thank you so much, Jacob. It's just such a pleasure to end my year with you. Today's the last day I'm doing anything work related until 2024, so I couldn't think of anything better.
I'm excited, super excited. I'm pleased that you are the last guest because just a background story, we're going to talk about it, but Emily also went to Babson. You guys know I'm a Babson grad, and I saw her, was it the 25 year of something?
25 years of entrepreneurship at the Arthur M. Blank Center Extravaganza Day. Yeah.
Yes, it was amazing, and I think you were one of the guest speakers, one of the main speakers, and I've actually heard about you prior in my MBA program, about your company. So, your name goes before. Your name is kind of familiar in the Babson world. But when I saw her speak there, I was like, no, she's a prime candidate or prime guest for the podcast as well. So I'm so excited that you were able to make the time for this. But before we get into it, Emily, if you don't mind, I think one of the things that we always talk about here is just how everything started. But before that, like your childhood experience, and how you became an entrepreneur. So one thing I would just love, I think me and the audience is, can you just tell us about how you grew up? I know now you're in Providence, but were you born in Providence, or where did it all begin?
Where did it all begin? Great question. Yeah, I've moved around quite a bit, but Rhode Island has always been my home base. I was actually born in Boston, but for the first part of my life, I lived here in Rhode Island. And my dad is an entrepreneur, but as a kid, I didn't know that's what he was. And honestly, today, I don't think he would call himself an entrepreneur. My dad owned a surf shop for 30 years. So surfing, skateboarding, snowboarding, windsurfing, kite surfing, you name it. And my dad, for about 25 of those years, was the only full-time surfboard shaper on the East Coast. His business is called Levy Surf Designs. And we had a physical store early 2000s when the economy crashed. Him and his business partner closed the shop. And in our backyard, in our house, my dad built a little, we call it the shaping shed. It's a 2-room building. In one room, he glasses surfboards. One room, he shapes surfboards. And he would meet customers at our kitchen table or on our couch, or, talking at the beach about what kind of design that they wanted. So heavily ingrained in that industry. And watching my dad, I just loved that. If he wanted to go surf in the morning, sorry, shop was open a little bit later. Or if he wanted to go surfing for 2 weeks in the Caribbean, that's what he would do.
Wow.
So I had no clue he was an entrepreneur. I don't think he calls himself an entrepreneur, but that's really my origins. And my mom, she worked in high fashion and advertising in Boston. So she was commuting almost 2 hours a day.
Wow.
When I was a kid, to make a more stable life for us as a family. And she was pretty much like intrapreneur, I would call her. You know, she started new initiatives within the corporation she went on to work with. And you know, both of them worked just so hard and really built something from nothing. So that has really stayed with me at a core childhood memory level. And you know, probably similar to you, why I was attracted to Babson was the entrepreneurial ecosystem and ethos. And yeah, I just went on campus and I was like, this is the place for me.
Uh,
So, um, yeah,
yeah.
it's been a wild ride since then, but that's a little bit of my entrepreneurial spirit.
No, thanks so much for sharing. I think it's very interesting how you say your dad won't call himself an entrepreneur, but he actually had, he was actually an entrepreneur, right? I think it's because I think sometimes the word entrepreneur, it gets misconstrued, right? Um, but at some point you have people that actually built, great business like your dad, but um, they don't want to own that title, or maybe they don't want to associate themselves that title with that title. But all in all, I think what you're saying, I think our audience really appreciates, like, you have these moments in your childhood experience where you just get to see things. Um, but in hindsight, you appreciate like the observations or learnings. One thing I want to ask is, what are the things that you maybe now in hindsight see about your dad or your mom that you actually are implementing now as the president of Mighty World? What is something that you probably have picked on that you're doing that is serving you well as an
Mhm.
entrepreneur now? Um,
That's a great question. I would say both of them have great vision
mm,
and are both artists in their own way. You know, they're not like typical, oh, I painted this. Well, actually, my dad paints on surfboards, but both of them I would consider visionaries in their own right. And my primary role at Mighty Well is really to have the vision for the company and to make sure whatever decisions we're making goes back to that vision. So sometimes I like to say, like, I'm seeing with my third eye. You
mm,
know, I'm really intuitive, really heightened sense of awareness. And it's both from like listening to the customers on the ground, but also tuning into my own vision for moving the company forward. And I think the vision has kept the mission alive.
yes, definitely, definitely. I think one thing, and maybe I'll emphasize this at the end of the this episode, is like you have a very like kind spirit. And I think I'm not saying entrepreneurs are mean, but it's like you're built. I think there's something in essence of like maybe because of the industry, the kind of platform you're built, but there's some sense of like you appreciate value, you appreciate people's kindness and stuff. And maybe that's something I want to allude at the end of the episode, because when we always end our episodes, we always try to give like what are some of the things you want to tell young entrepreneurs, or what are the things you want to tell female entrepreneurs or any entrepreneur about values that they should maintain or should learn. And so I think is something unique I've seen in your ability. And I'm wondering if that's something you picked up. Sounds like you had very amazing parents too that had that balance, right? It's not just a certain degree of you break things and build things and become a great entrepreneur, but there's some balance of like being a nice person too.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think at my core essence, I'm a nice person. I remember my mom's like corporate title was something along the lines of like VP of thoughtfulness.
Yeah.
So I definitely get that element in business from her. And I always saw how she treated people with kindness, respect, and that took her really far.
Mhm.
Um, but thank you for noticing that. It's definitely, I think, who I am at the core. But also, I could say it's been something I've had to actively work on and in learning to like ground myself and put down the stress of the day and come back to my true nature.
That's beautiful. That's also a very great quality too. So let's at least take a kind of step into. By the way, how did you end up in? I know you kind of clarified you were born in Boston, kind of Providence is where. So you ended up back in Boston primarily because of Babson, right?
Yes. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Life, actually. My parents got divorced when I was in the first grade, so about 7 years old. And my mom and I moved to Boston for 5 years, where she had been commuting to, so she didn't have to commute anymore. My dad remained in Rhode Island, same house my whole life. So yeah, then I went to Boston for 5 years. We moved to New Jersey, moved to Rhode Island, back to Rhode Island. And then I moved back to Boston for Babson and ended up staying for about a year and a half after to participate in MassChallenge.
Yep.
And then stayed on in their co-working space, probably a little too long. But Rhode
Were you
Island and
kicked out?
Providence.
Were
What
you
was that?
were you kicked out of MassChallenge?
No, I wasn't kicked out. They had this like satellite office in Newton, Massachusetts, and I did kind of like a startup house with my friends from Babson. There was like seven of us living in the house, two women. Um, and when our lease came to an end, I told the team that the company is moving to Providence because Rhode Island was making a huge investment into the medical industry and bio startups. And I just saw that Rhode Island was creating um, a really affordable place for startups to build and grow. And I could still be an hour from Boston and 3 hours from New York City.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Apologize for interrupting you. Just you mentioned the MassChallenge in the event, the 25-year event I attended. So about the housing and stuff. So now, yeah. So Babson, can you just share, because as a fellow Babson or Beaver,
Mhm.
can you share how that experience kind of shaped this company? We're going to talk about Mighty Well, and also just giving you perhaps the foundation of how everything, of how you became officially an entrepreneur, if you don't mind.
Thank Yeah, I get the gist of the question. MassChallenge played a huge role. And for those of your listeners who aren't as familiar, MassChallenge is a nonprofit business accelerator. They now have locations all over the world and throughout the US, but their headquarters is in Boston. And MassChallenge provided both like an ecosystem, co-working desks, programming, and access to capital. So MassChallenge was so important for Mighty Well because previously at Babson, my company was called Pick Perfect, which is now the name of our hero product. So like the product and the company had the same name.
Mm-hmm.
At MassChallenge, um, and it started before I graduated Babson, but really at MassChallenge, we created Mighty Well Inc., a Delaware C Corp. And we went through this branding process of creating Mighty Well as our brand platform because we knew we wanted to have a whole collection of products. So it's interesting, like so many of my friends at Babson were like, don't change the name, don't change the name. And I'm so glad we changed the name because what I want entrepreneurs and listeners to know is you have to think about, are you building a product or are you building a company? And both are completely valid. You just have to, again, come back to your vision.
Yep.
So just to conclude, my MassChallenge was so critical because my parents, specifically my mom and my stepdad, were really pushing me to get a corporate job. I actually had gotten a job offer in New York City, working for a real estate, heavily funded startup. And my parents were like, take this job. You can do Mighty Well nights and weekends. And getting into MassChallenge was a huge validator for the company. And I said, I'm not going to take this job. I'm going to give myself 2 years and see where I can go. And those 2 years have now turned into 7. So the lights are still on, mom and dad.
I see. I see. This is really beautiful, and I know some people, audience included. There's some level of like, oh, maybe you're lucky on stuff. I mean, there's some degree of hard work that you put in, but I think that determination to believe that it will work, and that's very commendable. I really love to hear that. And I'm sure your parents are proud of you. So.
Oh, they finally admitted like 3 years ago that I made the right decision. And I was like, yes.
Finally. So wait, can you just talk a little bit about this first product at Babson and And maybe this is something that I also love to hear, like when you at MassChallenge, right? Like what was the how did you get to the point where you're like, okay, let's make this into a platform, Mighty Well? And if you don't mind, sorry, there are many questions. If you don't mind, can you just talk about what Mighty Well is?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then talk about the first product and how you transition from the first product to Mighty Well.
Yes. So I'll start with what is MightyWell. MightyWell is an innovative medical wearables startup. We're very much leading in the direct-to-patient space. So we've really cultivated selling directly to patients, having our ear to the ground, building from the ground up in the healthcare space. We primarily focus on products for patients who are going through long-term IV therapy. This is part of why it's inspired out of my own story, because that's what I was experiencing. So for your listeners, maybe you know someone who's had a port in their chest for chemotherapy, or a PICC line in their arm for long-term antibiotics therapy, or they're in a wheelchair and they have a feeding tube. This is our core customer basis. But one of the most unique things we do about MightyWell is provide patients with education as well as caregivers. And we've partnered with our industry's nursing organization, the Association for Vascular Access, not only to really validate this category we're building, but to provide education directly to patients from the healthcare providers that are placing these medical devices. And I'm actually joining the board of that organization next year. So it's so cool. It was actually one of my Babson mentors who encouraged me to first show up to this nursing organization, the Association for Vascular Access. And I just showed up as a patient with my prototype, doing the summer venture program accelerator. And 8 years later, I'm on the leadership team starting next year. So crazy. So that's MightyWell. Check us out. Even if you don't need our products, you might know someone who does, or you might know someone who needs our education.
Definitely.
We do, first and foremost, we're primarily selling direct to patients. So we really understand patient e-commerce and that trust you have to build with patients. I believe patients, inboxes are such a sacred place. And that's how we have our main form of communication with them is really through our newsletters. So that's, the background of why I wake up every day to pursue this mission of helping patients to turn sickness into strength.
Definitely. And I'll include the link and definitely can check that out. For the first product at Babson, how did this product come about? And if you can just talk a little bit about that and how it became Mighty Well. I think you mentioned the name, if you don't mind.
Yes. So this also goes back to our why in our founding story. I was undiagnosed for about 7 years with tick-borne illnesses. Most people know Lyme disease. It's a pathogen transmitted through an insect bite from an insect called a tick. It's really, really common in the United States and in Europe, especially Germany. And it attacks your whole body in every way. For me, I had a lot of brain inflammation and damage to the nerves in my arms and legs. And while I was at Babson, I received this diagnosis and needed a long-term IV, which is called a PICC line. So I had this catheter hanging out of my arm for a whole semester. The device was threaded all the way into my heart. So it was a really serious, condition and thing I needed to protect. Yet, when I had a home care nurse, and the nurse and the doctors that I met, everyone I met just recommended that I wore a sock on my arm to protect this life-saving medical device. So imagine taking your socks, cutting the toes off, and wearing that on your arm.
Wow.
That's what I did at Babson. And for anyone who knows Babson, people wear business suits to class. So it just was I felt totally out of place. And I had a scholarship for women's entrepreneurial leadership. So I was in a position, within the school to really be put forth as a leader. Yeah, I really was uncomfortable with people looking at me
Mhm.
because of this medical device. And I tried, the solutions I found on Etsy and other small companies that created products, and they just didn't work.
Mhm.
And I was in a class, and the professor challenged us to solve a problem in our everyday life. My best friend was in the class, Maria, who is one of our co-founders to this day. And, we just got to work. We did a Kickstarter, we made a prototype. I found a woman to sew us a rough sketch. I consider myself a designer, but I'm not like a technical designer. Um, so yeah, Pick Perfect was our first product. It remains to be one of our best selling products. And now we have a version of that called the Pick Perfect Pro, which is a class 1 medical device. So we're officially, a medical device startup, which is so cool.
That's pretty cool.
And it's being used in hospitals, clinics, infusion centers, both in the US and abroad. One of our best markets is Hong Kong, Spain, Greece. So it's Australia. One of the things that really stood out when I met you, Jacob, was how you said um, something along the lines of my impact reached so far and wide that I don't even know,
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
And you were introducing me through a case study, but now we're shipping thousands of units
Yeah.
um, around the world every year, and I have no clue who these are now going to. And I feel like I'm just sprinkling little healing packages of light to people who need them most. And we now have 7 products, but the Pick Perfect, you know, #1 in our category on Amazon.
That's
So
cool. Well,
it's out there in the world.
that's amazing. I mean, this mic drop here. We can just end the podcast right now. That was that's pretty cool. I mean, I just alluding to that because I tried to mention this first product because I think when people go on the platform now as of 2023 getting to 2024, they say and young Babson students have been introduced to a podcast, and sometimes they go and say, hey, I want to start where my tour is right now, 2023, but you have to start somewhere. You used something you could use what you had,
Mhm.
and you built something at that time. You went to Kickstarter. There's a process to success. And
Yes, yes.
I just love the fact that you shared that because I want people to see that the spotlight is a process and you have to put in the work, but also do what you can with what you have to get to the ultimate goal of serving millions of people.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. And um, we're hearing the highlights here, but we could do a whole other episodes on all of the low, crying my eyes out moments because those are real too. But I want your listeners and other entrepreneurs to start by solving a challenge in their own life or their own community's life. I think that's what will provide them the fuel to keep going and also make a tangible impact that they can see.
Definitely, most definitely. This is kind of serious question. What keeps you up at night for your company specifically?
I mean, Jacob, let's be real. It's always how are we keeping the lights on? Because it's
Yeah.
this hard balance between wanting to invest in creating more products. We're trying to get what's called the CE mark in Europe so we can sell a medical device in Europe. That's I want to pull my hair out about that right now. But it's this balance between how do we keep the lights on? How do we keep growing? How do we keep innovating? We're a really small team. We're only 4 people full time. And my co-founders are my best friend, my now husband, and our full-time employee is my cousin. So,
It's a family business.
it's a family business. And it's not what we intended, but we were all just so passionate about the end consumer, which like I hate to call them consumers because they're people
Yep.
who have had the experience of being patients or are patients. But you know, we call them friends in the fight because you know we want to humanize them, and I wanted myself to feel humanized in the process.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. So I know one thing I'm always when I ask this question, I think most entrepreneurs like, I don't want to get started on this because there's a range of things that comes with. What's something you're most excited about in 2024 and beyond? I know you're gonna be on the board of this amazing platform. It sounds like the European market is an interesting one.
Yes, that's you know, the Association for Vascular Access is a nonprofit. So I'm extremely excited about lending my expertise and my status as a key opinion leader within vascular access
Mhm.
to that organization because it's going to ultimately impact the patient, but really it's the clinicians who are placing these medical devices. And I think it just kind of trickles down through there. So thrilled to have been elected to that position. And in terms of the growth of MightyWell, it's two fronts. Expansion into the international market is going to be really exciting for us. All of our B2B growth has been inbound. And actually, yesterday, we fully onboarded our first independent sales rep for the international market. So you know, a new adventure of having someone else represent the company overseas. Really grateful to Bill, seems Bill, who'll be joining the team, who just joined the team. But yeah, a lot of like regulatory challenges in Europe that I'm super new to. And I think that's where having co-founders comes in, right? Because it was my vision to like expand abroad, but it's really my co-founders who are like, I'm
Implementing.
going to say like weaving the threads to make that a reality. So yeah, that's a total team effort right now. And third, you know, I really want MightyWell to be able to expand and not just offer the innovative products we've created. I want MightyWell to be able to supply the best in class of medical supplies that patients have trouble accessing or need to know about. That was a huge challenge I experienced. And I believe healthcare is shifting online. We're in the midst of a patient revolution where patients actually can have a power and a say in the products that are going in and on their bodies. So that's something I've been like slowly working away at for the last 2 years. And I think there's a partnership I can't say too much about, but I have big aims for helping patients in new and exciting ways.
That's pretty cool. I'm excited. And you know, when you've become successful, when you have information you cannot share, it's like when you're starting on, you can say everything, but now it's like, oh, this is classified.
Yeah, confidential. Um,
That's when
confidential.
you know you have made it. Yeah, actually, there was a friend who also came on the podcast, and I think in the very beginning he shared everything, and now I think one of his lead investors, told him not to get online because he's he, there's some proprietary data that he cannot talk about on podcasts and stuff. So I think I'm seeing that evolution here too.
I will be forever using my voice, but you're right. There's some things you've signed NDAs on.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So what's the MightyWell? That name is very interesting. Can you talk about that name, MightyWell?
I wanted it to evoke an emotion,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted it to feel strong and bold. And what I talk about a lot is how I felt like a victim in the whole healthcare process. And part of creating MightyWell has been a vehicle for me to realize that I'm not a victim. You know, a terrible illness happened to me and ravaged my body, but it actually had a silver lining for me. And out of that has come a social enterprise that helps thousands of people across the world every day. So, yeah, I'd encourage entrepreneurs to think about the name for their brand, to invoke an emotion, and to think about how do they want their customer to feel.
Yep, exactly, exactly. No, it's a powerful name. It has a spiritual connotation, so it's pretty. It's a well thought out, well thought out. So, I mean, thanks for sharing a lot about my tour. I think there's a lot more we're gonna see, and many next year, many years to come. The next kind of phase is how these are light questions. I mean, they're not kind of light, but these are chill questions. As we, what is something that, if for a person who knows you best, how would the person describe you as a entrepreneur or as a person in a business?
I wish my co-founders were here. I love talking about myself, but it also feels weird. I think people would say I have a lot of courage.
Mm,
And you mentioned this at the beginning of our talk, and it wasn't actually something I saw within myself until quite recently, that to follow my dreams is an act of courage. To tell my story is an act of courage.
mhm.
To have fought an illness for so long and to now be in remission is an act of courage and a belief in myself and my body. So for today, I'll leave it at courageous. You could
Yes.
all hold me high in an act of courage.
No, I'll agree with that. I'll agree with that. I mean, just before I actually met you in person, even when I met you in person, and up to now, I think that's a common theme. One thing I'll say is like your your all persona, as well as it's reflective in your company, is memorable. Yeah,
Thank you.
it sticks. I think sometimes you meet people, I don't great people, but I mean, after a while, be like, okay, did I meet that person?
You can't forget me, Jacob.
Yes. No, I would. What's one thing that you have been really proud of? I think you have alluded to, just being sticking to something that you really treasure. You build this amazing company, but I think maybe something more personal, or maybe something that you've seen in terms of impact that you've done. I think one thing I would tell you is that Mighty Well has had an impact. And I think that's something that if I were you, I'll be one of the main things I'll be proud of. But what's something for you that you have really been proud of? And you can repeat an answer.
Yeah. I'm so proud that we're still in business 7 years later, and I'm still going to call us a startup. But yeah, I think anyone who can make it past year one
Yes.
is a hero.
Yes.
I'm so proud of, yeah, it is the impact. It's hearing from our customers on a daily basis, whether we're tagged in photos on Instagram or someone leaves us a review on our website or Amazon. I think the biggest thing, though, and I have not seen this done yet in healthcare, so I think this is truly unique about Mighty Well, is because we've really, I'm going to call it a power to the people moment of going direct to the patients, with our ear to the ground, listening. Even though I'm in remission, I am part of that community.
Mhm.
Patients have bought our products. They've taken them into their healthcare facilities.
Mhm.
So let's call it, they bought the Pick Perfect. They took it into their oncology center. The nurse or the clinician or the doctor said, "What is this? Where did you get this? I want to tell everyone about this." The
Mhm.
patient, whether they're a brand ambassador or not, advocates for the company to the clinician. Then the clinician goes and tells other patients.
Wow.
And oftentimes we've even seen that convert either into direct sales from the clinician's recommendation, or we've seen healthcare facilities purchasing and then giving our products to the patients or having them for sale to patients directly. So all of our B2B business has been completely organic.
Wow.
If anyone is a sales rep in the US, please call me. I'm hiring for that role right now, but I have yet to find another healthcare company where the customer is such an advocate in the way that our friends in the fight are.
That's pretty cool. That's amazing. I mean, it shows that it works. I mean, it works. And I think when customers become sales rep, that shows that the product is really, it's a really good product market fit.
Thank you.
That's incredible. What is some of the, what if along those lines, I think I added something here. What is an advice that maybe not advice, but what is learning that has stuck with you that has has made you keep going? You're now 7 years, the light is still on. What, or maybe it's because advice might be very limited, but like, what has been something that has made you feel like, okay, I can do this, I can keep doing this?
Yeah. Oof, wow. And I'll be so candid. There's so many times I wanted to give up because the door was slammed in our face.
Yeah.
Um, let's see what do I want to talk about? I actually want to talk about a more recent revelation.
Mm,
And
mm,
um, I had a mentor from Babson. Her name was Pat Enriquez. She's part of the Women's Entrepreneurship Center. I built a program called the Win Lab, and Pat became not only a college mentor, but a true friend and like a fairy godmother to me. And she passed away almost 3 years ago of cancer.
oh,
But
mm,
earlier this year, and everyone referred to as the chief. Like
mhm.
if you heard someone say, "Oh, the chief is coming," everyone knew that was Pat.
Oh, interesting. Name sounds very familiar, actually.
There's a scholarship foundation at Babson now.
Yeah, I think I've heard that name a lot,
She was
actually.
a force.
Yeah.
She is a force.
Yeah.
And earlier this year, she came to me in a dream,
Mm,
and she had this chief's hat on her head,
mm,
and she took the chief's hat off and she placed it on my head.
mm, mm,
And she was like, "You are the chief now. You are the chief of your own life."
mm, mm,
And where I was at this point in my life, I was like, I don't know if I can keep going, But when she metaphysically like put that chief's hat on my head, I just stood up straighter.
mm.
And now when I go into whether it's difficult conversations or meetings or places where I'm spreading my light, um, I envision that I have that
Mm.
chief crown on my head. And I just remind myself I'm the chief of my own life.
Mm.
And I want to impart that on your listeners that they are the chiefs of their own life.
That's powerful. That is, you have so many mic drops here. So many mic drops. No, thanks for sharing that. I think something well appreciated. And in this powerful story you've shared, and something I think it exudes in yourself and also in your work and how you carry yourself, which is pretty profound. What is something you tell other young entrepreneurs? A lot of people, seniors in Babson right now, they're trying to apply for jobs. So especially the undergrads, very entrepreneurial compared to the MBA. No, I did the MBA. MBAs are very just getting a job to some degree, but that's also some very successful entrepreneurs. But people that are really questioning, like, should I get into entrepreneurship? Should I believe so much in this idea? Um, um, what can you share with them as they get into the new year, thinking about what their life would be in 22, 23 years old? Um,
Yeah.
should they apply to MassChallenge, or should they
Apply to everything you think could be a fit. That was my MO. I applied to, some people say, well, we did too many accelerators. We were part of the Morgan Stanley Innovation Lab, who led an investment in the company. We were part of the Cartier Women's Initiative, who gave a grant to the company, and that's a global program. We did a bunch of more regional accelerators because they came with mentorship, office space, grant funding. So going back to my advice for them is start to lay a trail for yourself and give yourself a timeline. So say, I have this great idea, I got a time together, I've got a little bit of traction. I'm going to see where I can take this in 1 year. And in 1 year, if it's not going the way I want, we'll reevaluate. So that's what I did. I said I was going to give myself 2 years after graduation. A big milestone was getting into MassChallenge. We also won what at the time was called the Babson Breakaway Challenge, which was the largest VC investment in a female-owned company in the United States. And we won that. So I had a little bit of capital. I had, world-renowned accelerator. And it was kind of like an FU to my parents that I was going to do what I wanted to do. And again, it came back to the impact I was making. It was so tangible. Our very first customer, she was a mother of 2. She was pregnant for the 3rd time. She had a PICC line in her arm. She was telling me how, her kids would try to pull at the PICC. And Maria and I went to the post office on the Babson campus, and we mailed that first package to her. And I think we sold it through like our Etsy platform. And we got a photo back of her, our first customer. Her name's Jacqueline. And she's going like this. And your viewers can't see me, but I'm doing like a strong arm, like a powerful pose. So yeah, it was just, we could clearly see who we were helping on day one. And the impact is always what I go back to. And even if you're creating like a super, technical thing, like where's the impact in the world? I think that's what's kept me going. And for my friends who are founders, I know that's what's kept them going as well.
Definitely. I mean, yours is very, very evident. And I really want to thank you for your work. And I think it's your platform you built is relevant. It's not just relevant, but it's there are things that, not to throw shade, like when you have platforms where like Uber Eats is a great platform, but I can go to a restaurant and get food, but I think yours is life-changing. And I comment, I just comment the fact that you stuck with it, you built it to a point where I know next year and the years to come, it will transform the world, not just the US or So I'm excited to meet you at this inflection point.
Thank you. Me too. I feel like 2024 is our year. We've made so much impact, but I want to 10x that, 100x that. We've got some great products, but there's so much more I want to bring to life. And I'm really excited about the things we have in the pipeline for 2024. So grateful that I got to end my year in conversation with you, and just to meet other people who are doing good in the world is where I'm deciding to put my time and my energy these days.
Beautiful. How can people reach out to you if you want them to reach out to you?
LinkedIn is the best. Emily Ana, A-N-A, Levy. There's actually quite a few Emily Levys in the world. So Emily Ana Levy, you can connect, send me a message. mightywell.com or at mightywell, and there's like a little _ on Instagram, or signing up for our newsletter is how we communicate the most with folks, and listening to this podcast.
Oh yeah, that's a nice plugin right there. Necessary. Are you on X, formerly Twitter?
No. You know what, Jacob? I gotta pick my battles right now. Most of my time is on LinkedIn, and I'm like, are they on Instagram anymore? Mighty Well's Instagram is active, but just personally, it's like too much trauma.
That's a conversation for another podcast episode. We got fly to that. So guys, thank you all for listening to our episodes in 2023. ending on a very great note with Emily. Might well. And I hope you guys have a wonderful holidays and see you guys in 2024. Thank you. Thanks again, Emily.
Thanks.